So thank everybody for coming to our third podcast. Today we were going to speak about 2022 Black Health and Wellness. Um, that is the theme for this year's Black History Month. Um, as we were looking at having that conversation, it just became apparent that as we start talking about Black health and wellness and mental health, um, we just felt like there is something out there that we needed to at least discuss in some aspects. And we've decided to change the format of this call or excuse me, this podcast. And we've just decided to touch on some things that are happening today in the world that's impacting us from a mental health standpoint. The primary one that we were going to discuss today is what happened with Amir Locke. Um, I know there's a lot of people out there who are thinking about that, and we wanted to be transparent and open and not shy away from the conversation. This is what Black at TP is about. This is about us being a community and having conversations. Sometimes they're not the easiest conversations, but it's okay to have it and listen and understand. I know there's going to be a video that's going to be played here shortly. And then after that video, we'll have some more dialogue with Amanda being our host for this particular show. So with that said, I'm going to pause and let the video play.
Amir Locke was a legal gun owner with no criminal record. And yet, he was shot and killed by Minneapolis police who say they feared for their safety while raiding the apartment where Locke was sleeping. Body cam footage shows that Locke was shot less than 10 seconds after police burst in, rousing him from where he was sleeping under a blanket on the couch with a gun in his hand. It's his gun that police are using to justify his death.
All right. So we're back, and I'm going to pass it to Amanda, who's going to be our host for this podcast. And let's get into it.
Awesome. Thanks, Mo. I'm super honored and blessed to be hosting today's discussion. I believe historically we haven't had platforms for this type of discussion, and I feel privileged that we can bring this today. I'm joined once again with our executives of Black at TP and our allies, and unfortunately, we seem to face this issue again. It's horrible but shocking, and I find myself being numb to the very consistent news on the same scenarios that come up. I think about my first reaction when I learned about Amir Locke. It was not shock or outrage, and unfortunately, it was like a numbing feeling of this again. The perfect word would be to desensitize. But then again, I'm back and forth with resentment and continued disgust, which is like pretty harsh words, right? And so it makes me think about my first question, which is for the team, of course. If you can describe your thoughts on what is happening today after learnings about Amir Locke, what would that word be?
I'll start. And for me, the first thing that comes to my mind is the word sameness. It's more of the same. And we once again find ourselves in the position of having a conversation that we would much rather not have. However, it's a reality and we can't run from it. So my word that comes to mind is sameness, but also the question, so now what? And it's the same question that I've had racing through my mind for the last few years when we see these kinds of things.
So, and I agree with Bob. I think his sentiments are spot on, but I think that I would say tragic would be the word that I would say. I mean, all of the things that we've seen over the past few years have been, tragic. And, here we go. And you could keep hearing that word again, right? I have this saying that sometimes people will ask me how I'm doing, or what am I doing? And I'll say, same thing, different day. I think that's what I felt. Same thing, different day. But my heart is heavy because in this instance, it should not be same thing, different day, right? It's still a tragedy. And I think that's what I would say.
I would say mine is defeated. I feel like this happens so often that we can't, as a country, figure out how to make it work for all of us. And I feel defeated because I just know that it could have been me. You know, I have a gun, I sleep on a couch, I have a, you know, there's a lot of different scenarios that run through my head in this whole process, but um, I feel defeated because I feel like everything is so highly politicized that we just cannot get past the politics to start to really do the meaningful work in the communities to help the situation be better. And without the legislation and the support, then these things won't stop. You know, they will continue to happen. You know, we spend, you know, you think about what it takes to be a police officer. My family has police officers, and my fraternity brothers are police officers. Um, you know, and then, you know, I also have other family members who have cosmetology, licenses, and it feels like it's harder to become to go through get your cosmetology license than it is to be a police officer, unfortunately. So I just feel defeated. I think it's okay to have support and give the officers the tools that they need, but I think it's just I think it's wishful thinking to think it's just going to happen on its own without the proper legislation.
Yeah, and Mo, very good point. You know, when you talk about um you just the tip of the iceberg was the reference to the training and the tools and giving officers what they need, you know, that kind of thing. So I want the audience to be clear that we are not on this call to bash the police.
Absolutely not.
That's not what we're doing. Well, I mean, I think I speak for all of us when I say that we believe, you know, police are necessary, right? Nobody's talking
Absolutely.
about defunding the police or anything like that. Um, However, you know, listen, I myself, I'm a chaplain for the police in my city. I ride in the police car on ride-alongs. I get calls when things happen in my city and someone dies. So I know how hard the policeman's job is from where I sit. You know, I've been in the presence of some things. So they're absolutely necessary. But when we talk about legislation here, one of the things, and I'm glad you said it because many years ago, when probably a lot of people on this call weren't even um, they certainly weren't born, probably most of them. But in 1961, Martin Luther King said, and this is written in his book. It's Martin Luther King letters. The title of it is "I Have a Dream," but it's multiple letters inside of that book. It's writings and speeches by Dr. Martin Luther King, and in one of them, which he was writing, he said, "It's a time for freedom." 1961. He said, "The law tends to declare rights, right? It does not deliver them. A catalyst is needed to breathe life experience into a judicial decision by the persistent exercise of the rights until they become usual and ordinary in human conduct." In other words, laws and legislation are not going to change people. People change people. So
Right.
we have to continue to have, for whatever it takes. I'm tired. I know Mo, Connie, and Amanda are tired of the things that we see happening in our community. But we can't give up, and that's that. And that's the hard part. So that's why it's important that we continue on, but we continue on with allies and advocates as well.
I agree with that. If I can just jump in really quickly, when I think about this as an ally and as a mother of 3 Black daughters, and my husband is Black, and I've lived in a predominantly Black community, and so that's my heart. I, I'm just continually saddened and frustrated, as I know that everybody else on this call is. And I think where that leaves me anytime we hear another instances of this is, what can I do, right? How can I help? How can I affect change? And there isn't an easy answer. I think we all know that, or it would have potentially been resolved at this point, right? So I think that the important thing as an ally and somebody that cares is, I will continue to speak up when I see injustices done. I'll use my voice locally. We've talked about, it really starts with, who are you voting into office? Because at the local level, that's where it starts. It's not just at the national level with our presidential elections. And so while that's not the, single thing that is going to change this, from my perspective, while I'm saddened, it also emboldens me to figure out, how do I continue to try to help push for the right things.
I appreciate it. With the words collectively, like, we have a range of different emotions, right? We have saddened, frustrated, outrage, and then, to Rob and Jen's point, we also have encouragement and hope. But we think about this podcast, the goal was to talk about mental wellness and health. And it brings me, like, to think about how racism is a public health crisis. The psychology of it all and how it relates to mental health and awareness is more prominent now more than ever. And it leads me to the second question, or thoughts, team, on the very idea of how all the racial instability we have viewed in the last few years impacts us as a community. Connie, I'd love to get your thoughts on that. What are your thoughts on that?
Can you hear me okay? So something that Jen said really kind of struck me there, when she talked about having children. And so in this environment, I have two Black sons. So I think for me, worry not just about my own children, but children in our community. It is, how do you get your community to come together, especially in a pandemic, right? It's harder to touch people. So I think over the last few years, what has worried me is that, can we get together as a people, what, with ourselves and with our allies, right, enough in this environment to address some of the key issues that we've seen over the last 2 years.
Yeah, I love that. Mo, what's your thoughts? I mean, how all the things that are happening, impacts our psychology, impacts our mental health, and, reaction. Like, what are your thoughts or reactions?
For me, it's just tiring. Honestly, I am mentally, emotionally exhausted. I am um, I'm not sure how to be Black in America. I just want to be me, and I can't. I was blessed to be raised in a very strong family, blessed to have some, to be able to be, a part of a community that was very inviting, but you know, it is stressful, and it is very concerning when you just know that you're just based off the color of your skin. You have to, and for a lack of a better word, sometimes code switch just to be able to show people that you're articulate, or that that you're more than just your skin color. And I don't know why I have to do that, and it tends to be sometimes very, like I said earlier, tiring, and um, it does play an impact mentally, right? Like, and I'll just speak for myself. Being promoted is I know I work hard, and I know I can kick butt in the work environment. Um, but sometimes I don't, you feel like how do you compete when you have ideas, or, and I'm not speaking from a top performance standpoint, I'm speaking just a work experience standpoint, because I've had multiple jobs and then been in multiple scenarios. And I think, it's hard sometimes when I have to, you might have a great idea and you get shot down, and then someone that says the exact same thing, and it's like they like they came up with that. And it sometimes it slows my growth down. I might even become less talkative. I might be even more, less open to share, because I don't want to come off as, um, maybe not knowledgeable or whatever that may be. But I, I think from your point when you say it is a, um, it is definitely it definitely has a social impact, and it, it definitely impacts me. And but again, I'm one person. I'm blessed to be where I'm at. I am not in any way, shape, or form, um, saying "woe is me." I am just sharing that it is tiring, and it does help, to talk about it. Um, but I know folks in my situation. I mean, for example, just to bring it up, we had in our first podcast that we had a conversation around how do I get help if someone's not listening to me, and that's that is a that I could only imagine that person feeling like they don't have a voice, and what their experiences may be and what they may be going through. And so even that is a mental, I struggle with that because I'm in a position to where I can help folks, and we want to, but there's so many people. I'm sure there's more stories out there like that, that they're looking at us to help and support, and we will. Um, but honestly, it's a lot to, to kind of process and think about, and for myself, I guess, just to, you know where to start and where to help these people out.
Yeah, Mo, and incidents such as we just witnessed in the past few days cause you um, to just reflect back not only to George Floyd, but all of those other names that we can we can call out, right? And then the added pressure on the African American or the Black is that now we have to go into our workplaces. And you know, when you do that, there's always this, race is something that um, the African American has had to deal with for since we came to this country, since we were brought to this country, and oftentimes, even in our workplace, race is that angel or devil that is always sitting there, reminding us that we are somehow different because that's what we've been told all of this time, right? And this idea, this reality, you know, means that in most cases, there has to be a word that I heard one of you use the other day. We have to have and develop this internal fortitude to understand that this is a reality. I'm sure that my need to come to work is different than my white colleague, right? And they can't understand or relate to that added pressure on the African American. You don't know what you don't know. They've never walked in my shoes. Conversely, I've never walked in theirs. So the idea of privilege in many cases that are afforded to some is not something that we've had the advantage of having as a whole, right? I've been privileged and honored in a career that has allowed me to do the many things I have, but on a whole, it's not. And I think when we understand that this thing called implicit bias, it's always at play. That's going to add to the mental health strain and the pressure, right, that somebody feels, because at the end of the day, we're all human and we all have our biases. But the implicit bias sometimes that is done through sayings of microaggressions and things like that simply just add to it. So when we have incidents that happen like this, sometimes what they can do, even to an executive, is remind you, hey, that could be you. It brings you back to let you know that you need to be aware at all times of your surroundings and where you are. It's a shame, but it's the pressure, and it's what we've had to live all of these years.
Rob, it's not just the pressure, it's that we have to come to work, right? And act in a manner that has not touched or impacted me in any way, right? So you get into, I gotta go into this mode so I don't show whatever happened. And so that puts that added mental pressure right on you, because you feel like you're not allowed to express what may be impacting you mentally, you know, from a social aspect or outside of the job.
It does. It really does. And it's a heavy lift, right? It's a heavy lift. But you know, I hold on to something that I'm sure we all have, because every person in the world has faith. Your faith may be in something different than mine, but you have faith in something. And so for me, that is what I cling to in times such as this, because you have to find an anchor. You have to have an anchor, because otherwise, you can let this thing get to you and you can go, you know, far off to the left or to the right, and that wouldn't be good for you, your family, or anybody else. So yeah.
I'm gonna just jump back in, and you know, it's crazy because it's, even in this conversation, I'm doing emotional gymnastics. I think this has probably been the hardest podcast, even in trying to find the right words of what I'm trying to express. And it's just emotional gymnastics, trying to process through it. And one of the emotions I do feel, though, is one, I've just been able to how do I sound coming across, articulating my thoughts? And I feel like they're all over the place, more than they've ever been into any podcast that I've done. And also, am I being honest with myself? You know, what is really bothering me? What is, and because the question that you asked, Amanda, is a really good one, and it's so true. And I think the harder problem for me is, I felt guilty when I heard about what happened to Amir Locke, and I felt ashamed of myself, because when I heard that he had a gun in his hand, I mentally thought, like, why would he do that? Like, why would you have this in your hand? And I emotionally beat myself up after I realized, what are you talking about? Like, that is just that is programming that is designed to say that, but that's not really true. And I said it earlier. I mean, I own firearms. You know, if I'm in town, I'm traveling, you know, locally, and I'm in a hotel, I'll bring my firearm. If I'm at campgrounds, which, you know, we go camping quite a bit, I always have my firearm with me, and it is accessible and easy to access. And I was very upset with myself, because I couldn't even afford him in this moment. And this is my truth. I felt so upset with myself, 'cause I couldn't give, I unintentionally was biased and not knowing why. And I don't want to be that person. I don't want to think that way, and I don't want to be that way. But unintentionally, knowing that he was even on his cousin's couch, for whatever reason, mentally, I assumed that it was wrong just off the bat, and I I don't understand why I would feel that way, but then that's part of it. That's that mental gymnastics you go through.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, team, I appreciate all the thoughts and reactions that, we've kind of incorporated within this dialogue. And I think about our audience as they are probably coping with the same thing. And so hearing your thoughts, your reactions, how you guys are processing, it's super, super important. And it really makes me think about, us being on the board and this aspect or this thought of responsibility, right? How do we are board members, right? How do we continue to create and foster this feel of support during these times for the folks that are listening? Because it's really important for us to do, be it continuing with these types of podcasts, but would love to get your thoughts on how do we craft or create this community feel for everyone that's listening to your reactions and to your thoughts.
I think that just real quick that this isn't a TP commercial, but I'm going to say it. I think that teleperformance has allowed an ERG or ERGs, because it's not just Black at TP. There's Asian, there's Latinx, there's women of TP. There are all of those. But we have a platform in a large organization that has afforded us the space to have support of our colleagues and friends to go to in the midst of a storm. Why is that important? Because I think that people need a place to be able to talk. We don't want someone in our work environment, on our programs, in our that we're working with, to be suffering in silence. So if as long as we can allow them just the space to where we don't have to say anything sometimes. Sometimes we have to just listen. My wife tells me all the time, I ain't asking you for an answer, I just need you to listen. So I think if as long as we can continue to be that, the how is going to be dependent upon the individual situation in terms of what we do, what we recommend, that kind of thing. I personally, I said it to you guys in private session, but I'm not a licensed practitioner when it comes to mental health counseling, right? I am ordained and I can do biblical counseling, right? But people need different things, different avenues, different resources. Our responsibility is to just be present. And if we are that is the best that we can do until we understand and know what the situation is that we're dealing with. And then we reach out to people who might be able to help them, whether it's at another level, whether it's we reach out to Jen, whether we reach out to Miranda and we let them do their thing, and or whomever it might be. But that would be my thought, Amanda, as an answer to how we do what we can do for the others in the company.
If I can
Yeah.
just jump in as well.
Tammy.
I was just going to tag on to what Rob said. What you said really hit me, because if you take a step back and we remove ourselves from this situation and you just think about how do we always talk in leadership about together we're better, right? And you want diversity in action in mind. And I think that having people talk to each other, just like we're saying, we don't have all the answers. We can't change this situation overnight by ourselves. This is not something that, TP is going to fix. But by starting to make people feel comfortable to have this venue where you can talk rawly and openly about what your feelings are and know that it's safe and there's not judgment, and it's a community of people that really are leaning in together, whether that be Black employees, any other diverse employees, whether it be allies. We are in this together, and that's how I think that we have to start thinking to try to just support each other to get through it, because to that reason, we don't have the ability to just change this on our own. So this is a good first start, in my opinion. And we don't want anybody suffering in silence. I mean, I think that's one of the worst things that we can see. And it's found in suicide rates today. You're seeing them on the incline, and particularly in the Black community, and particularly with Black women. That's alarming, right? And so that to me says that there's too many people that are suffering without feeling like they've got a voice or a place to go. So I hope that that's what we can create here, even more so than we've done to this point.
Yeah, Jen, I think that having that forum or that ability to just be able to exercise your voice, right, as an individual with what you're feeling about what's going on in our community is extremely important. I think, offline we've had conversations about forums that I've been privy to. One called DINE, Diversity Inclusion Network event, is where you take an individual who looks like you or one of your allies, out and have dinner with them in a different type of environment, or in a environment where you're able to have conversations to talk openly about, how you're feeling, understand how the other individuals are feeling. Again, as Rob said, we're not health people. We don't have degrees in health, mental health, but I do think it's important that we have that ability to express how we're feeling, and being able to do that, just creating environments, or many environments where we are able to do that, is important for our group.
Mhm.
Agree.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you both. I think about one's voice, right? We think about having the conversation, and sometimes it's not solutioning. Sometimes it's just hearing each other out. And it makes me think about, the how do you navigate these careful discussions? I am a mother of two, and with all of these things happening, it's always I'm a lioness. I think about them first in terms of how do I handle them first. Sometimes it's just the way a mother, thinks. One of the questions that I have for the team is, how are you guys navigating these crucial conversations, be it with children, be it with colleagues, or even a mentee or mentor? I think this, getting your thoughts team on this, I think will be really instrumental on maybe sharing how you guys work through these conversations.
So let me start with the children, and all my children are grown and I have grandkids, but I have to tell you, with the boys, the conversation is a lot different than with the girls, and this has been since they hit puberty, right? And so with the boys, you have to have the talk, and the talk is when you are addressed by somebody in authority, how to respond, how not to move. Um, some kids have mouths on them, so you have to have. Today, my sons are 38 and 39. Our code is, if they ever get pulled over, they have to call me and put me on a speakerphone so I can listen to the entire conversation.
Yeah.
And they do that. They don't get pulled over that often, but they do. I have one that is very light, and I have one that is darker than myself. He tends to get pulled over quite often, and so he has to. That's the code, right? My grandson went off to college, so we did, we got the cam in the front of the car, and we have the talk. And so I think your initial response is you got to have the talk, right? And then when these things happen, you got to have a whole different kind of talk, because as Rob stated, it's I think the police have a job. I think that they have some things that they have to learn, differently, in terms of how to interact with people of different cultures. I think that that's a responsibility that the communities have to their police officers, to make sure that they're equipped to deal with people of different nationalities. So I think that the talk looks different. With the girls, there is no code. But with Breonna Taylor, we saw that there might need to be a code with the girls. But I never felt that I had to have a conversation with them. But with the boys, I had to establish a framework for, this is how you act. This is what you do if something happens. Here's your first step. Here's who you don't talk to. We have to have that. We have, attorney that we keep on retainer. So we haven't had to use it, but we pay it because that's how we feel that we must, just as a result of everything that's going on in our community.
Yeah. Mo, did you want to chime in?
Yeah, sure. We do all those things as well with our kids, and my mom did those things with me as well. Um, I also take an approach with my children to help them understand how we got here. Like, they need to be knowledgeable why, um, why certain scenarios happen. I have the ability, and God bless it, that if my kids got in trouble, I have been blessed to be afforded the ability to get them to at least get them the support they need to possibly either get them out of trouble or reduce charges, whatever that may be. um, and I want to make sure my kids understand that not everyone has that. They don't have that ability to you know go to court and have an attorney show up, and then a lot of kids don't have choices. They have to plea bargain and end up going to jail and do time and get some sort of record. And so I try to teach my kids to understand that there's socioeconomic issues that are impacting our communities that have changed the dynamics of what's possible. And my son goes to a predominantly Black school, a really great football team, but from an education standpoint, they're probably they're not the best in the county, and so he has to deal with. I have to continue to conversate with him of why there's differences between us, our family and the families that he sees at school. And so the conversation I continue to teach him is your words have power. Um, you're not, it's not that you're special. We've been afforded an opportunity to do things different. If you are ever in these situations where have to address authority, you're articulate, how you were raised, my expectations, and I expect him to meet if I am not available to support him in any situation that could cause him trouble. I do expect him to handle himself as if he was dealing with me, that will ensure that he will not get in trouble. And that's kind of the process that I've taught my children. Um, and it seems to have worked. So, thus far. But again, I mean, it's sad that I even have to have a conversation about it with my kids. It's just, it sucks that you even have to really go there. But I also think that he knows that he speaks different. His vernacular is different. Um, but he handles himself exceptionally well, and that's all I can expect from him.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I'm in a lot of the same boat as Connie in terms of kids in the household, right? Because I have none. My eldest is 20. Yeah, I wish. My eldest is my eldest is 42. It'll be 43 next month. Wow. But and then I have a couple of others that are well, a daughter who's 30, I had another son. Unfortunately, he's deceased. But then I've got some little grand boys, and so the conversations that I have are not um, as frequent as somebody like Mo would be having, or Amanda, and even Connie and Jen with the real little ones. But that conversation for the boys is universal in our community, right? I had to give it to my son years and years ago when he first started driving. My dad gave it to me when I started driving um, 2 or 3 years ago. But it's just we all have to have that discussion with the boys when they start driving, where that 10 and 2 with the hands and all of that kind of thing. We've even gone so far as there's a lady out there, she's in Washington D.C. now, who's developed this really cool thing. It's called uh, not reaching. It's a little pouch that goes right into your vent from your air conditioner or something, and you put your license and your registration card in there, so that when the cop comes, it's right there. And she used to be a member of my church. She moved away to DC, and she's doing huge things with police departments across the country. So what we have to do is to gird them up in the best way that we can, to be aware of their surroundings, if possible. Something comes up, get to a safe place where there's lighting, all those kind of things. And I think it's just conversations that we have to have that a lot of other folks don't have to worry about. And it's unfortunate, but we have to keep doing it until, as I said, people change. But it's tough. It's tough, but we've got to just be persistent and do those things.
Yeah, thank you all for your thoughts. It's funny, to wrap up my final question, um, and it kind of segues into the conversation dialogue that we were addressing. I think about when the whole George Floyd incident happened, because it was really major. I wasn't here at this organization. It was my last organization where everything happened for me. And when the incident arose, it was an overwhelming outcry, or folks reaching out to me, leaders, executives within the organization. When I say, like, emailing me, texting me, sending messages, like leaving messages on voicemail, just calling to say how can they help, how can they support me throughout these times. They're listening, and it was really important, because it makes me think about, what does support look like with our allies, right? Um, and support could be different. I know at the time when I had that overwhelming level of support and folks reaching out, I was still processing things. And so I wasn't as quick to reach out to everyone. But it felt comforting that I had folks reaching out, checking in on me. And I think, from my point of view, support looks like listening. Sometimes it's letting me voice my concerns, being present within the conversation. May not necessarily be solutioning, but just being there. And so my final question to the team is, what does support look like with our allies? Are there any thoughts or areas that you guys can kind of tap into personally on this question?
I'll go first. It, this is a prime example of it. I think Black Guy TP, the ERG, is a great starting point for us for a support standpoint. Um, I think that um, continue having these conversations and be willing to listen. We have a platform inside of this ERG that we can share. Um, there's I have friends who are Republicans and Democrats who, I don't care what side of the aisle you sit on, but I think it's really important that if we could just have simple conversations, it may help people understand where how they can help at the state and local levels from a voting standpoint, just to help to make it better for all. And so I think things like this ERG, Black ITP, getting involved in our communities, is a great way to show support. And one of them probably, one of the main reasons why I'm just so glad that Health Performance has opened up the door to do that, because I know it's going to help a lot of people.
Yeah, Mo, I'm really happy that TPE is opening that door. I think that's critical. So Amanda, to answer your question, I think that I'm going to say it depends, but yeah, so I'm going to say it depends. So I think that, some of the things that are happening external create, one of the reasons we're having this podcast is to talk about, Black mental health. And so sometimes when these things happen, I think that we might need to tap into professionals, right? Which doesn't depend on, how that actually impacts you. And then I think that, Mo said it is to be able to have a group like this or other groups established where you can come to the table and just have some candid conversation. Again, not for solutioning, but just have someone that you're able to talk with and share how you're feeling at that particular time.
If I can also just share some advice that I was given, in particular, right after George Floyd had died. And I was wanting to know, with my family, we were having a lot of conversations that we hadn't had in the past. But even with my community, I was asking my friends, how can I actually be a powerful ally? It's not just saying I'm an ally, right? And some of the key things that I took away from that were, that it's not just tagging yourself as an ally. It's not just posting things on social media, which is great. It's a great platform. It's not enough. It's truly using your voice when nobody's watching, right? So when you see something that's happening in the grocery store or just happening out in your general life, it's standing up for people and calling it out, right? That it becomes unacceptable. The other advice that I got that was very, very powerful, and it comes down to listening, excuse me, but it was about listening and not taking offense. So as a white person, with my husband, with my friends that are Black, and they wanted to be raw with their feelings and very vulnerable and honest. Their frustrations were not vented at me as an individual. It was about the systemic issues. And so I think that as allies, we all need to sort of put our personal aside and realize that this is not about us. So I think those were a couple of the primary things that I took away, and hopefully that can help other allies. And would love your feedback too, just from this panel, on if you see that there are different things.
So Jen, I think that's some great advice. I think that, as a Black person, right, I have to equip you, my ally, with information that will help you stand for me, right? So I think that's why it's important for us to have these different forums where we sit with people who don't look like us. We talk to them about the issues that are going on in our community. We share our voice and our feelings. And I think that helps equip you and your ability to stand with us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that really what you're outlining is education, right? It's helping educate, and that is absolutely the Black community. It's great to have that sponsorship and support, but I think also it's upon us to really dig in. It's not for the Black community to have to educate every person
Right.
on why this is bad. But I do think that it's a partnership, right? When we look at it, but we really, if you're going to be an ally, you've got to put the time in to educate yourself.
Yeah, you guys said a lot, and I'll tell you, if anybody is at the point where they think that they, and this is critical, they're feeling that I want to be an ally, and they're feeling this pull to be an advocate, to speak up for those who, to ensure that there's representation at all levels. If you are there and feeling that, you're in the right place, because what you are doing by feeling that is acknowledging that there's a need for change. And change is only going to occur if we have the dialogue and are able to create this space where we can, people, again, I go back to they don't know what they don't know. And, and unless we can create that particular paradigm, they'll never know. I mean, there's no shortcut to doing this work. Diversity and inclusion work is hard. It's exhausting. We've heard each of us have said it. This is tiring to have to go through these things and then to try to, you know, be your best self every single day. This is tiring work, and it consumes the energy that we have, and it causes us to think beyond ourselves, right? And to have a vision of not just what's in front of us, but what is beyond this pain that I'm feeling now. That is what's going to continue to drive us. And so, in conclusion, what I would say is we have a great platform. Let's use it. Let's invite everyone in, because this thing, again, they can change the laws, but there has to be the human effort behind that law so that those things become the normal course of action, as opposed to just being something written on paper that nobody abides by. And so, as tiring as it can be, it's also energizing to know that I believe, listen, guys, I believe, and maybe you heard me say this before, I don't think that there's any greater time to be alive. I think this is like the best time in history that we could be alive. I know in the moment, sometimes we would say, I don't want to deal with it. But man, if we keep pushing, there is some change we can make, even if it's small change, right? In our little sphere of influence. That's a big thing. If we can create an environment where Mo's little kids and Amanda's little kids and Jen's and Connie's grandkids can feel safer around the other, then we've helped. So I just want to encourage you guys. Let's just keep on going. We'll keep doing this thing, and we'll do the best that we can do. I'm looking forward to the day that on the podcast, and it's the board of Black at TP, and we got some 20-some-year-olds on here. We got, some 20 and 30-some-year-old Black executive folks on this phone. Imagine, Black and white. Imagine that.
Mm-hmm.
That's where that's the impact we can have by
Yes.
letting people know that they are empowered. So that's what I would say in conclusion.
And
I love it.
I will say, just because I haven't said really, a whole lot, but when you're talking about the support piece, to wrap it up, you guys have said so many things that, like, I'm just sitting over here thinking about. Like, it's all the same stuff that comes to my mind. Education. We've had a lot of private talks that, I told you all, especially back when the George Floyd thing first happened. It was about making sure that I was educated. Um, you know, Going and finding that for myself, like Jen said, it's not on the Black community to tell me what is wrong, or what, is being done wrong, or what I can do to help. I need to go learn that. So, I get yourself educated. I think it's definitely about taking action. It's, again, just mimicking. It's not going and saying, "Hey, I'm here, I'm an ally, raise my hand." It's going and being a voice for this community. I think another thing, especially myself, like, it's being mindful. You can, even if you're out here trying to make change and you're trying to help be a voice and you're trying to do all these things, it's to be mindful of that starting point that you were really truly trying to help someone. Um, Perfect prime example. The other day, we've been doing these podcasts. We've been talking about being there for people and things that we can do. And I literally had to take a step back and say, we've been talking about this, but I haven't asked you how you're doing. So how are you doing? You know, and that's just a mindfulness thing on my end. And then even the kid situation, like I don't have, you know, black children. I will never know what that's like. But on my end, I think even still as an ally with a child, it's how do I teach my daughter to make your all's kids feel better, like not feel better, but about being around each other. Like,
Mhm.
how do I make sure that my daughter is not making a black child feel like they're not included or like there's something different about that? Because, you know, I still have to explain to her not only what's going on, but how we got to this point. And now,
Mhm.
as you grow up, how do you be a change?
Yeah.
So, on my end, that's what support looks like.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's good.
Well said.
Love
Well
it.
said.
I love it all. I love how the conversation started where we were describing words and, talking about our feelings. And it seems like we're wrapping it up right now in conversations of hope and making an impact,
Encourage.
and, being that support system. And so, this is what we're doing to create that within our ERG. And I'm so proud that we created a platform to do that, to have this conversation. I'm proud that we took a step back and said, you know what, let's change things up with the podcast and really get in the face of this. And I think about, we've engaged with HR, we've talked with the leaders and made sure that everyone knew what we were preparing to talk about and to discuss. But the wavering of support and being able to utilize our platform this way is extremely necessary. It feels hopeful, and of course, making an impact. So I am thankful for all the thoughts and the reactions from this team. I'm proud that I moderated this session. I'm processing my emotions as well. But I hope that the audience got a chance to see themselves, feel, the same feelings as the leaders have, and really resonated with today's discussion. And for that, I think it's a wrap. Mo, any final thoughts on your end?
No, it's just been an honor to be part of these podcasts. I've learned a lot. We've had a lot of meaningful discussions, and I just want to thank the panel again and our board members and just for having this open and honest discussion and being vulnerable in these conversations. It's not easy to do. Um, but I hope that our listeners know that comes from a place of love, that it comes from a good place from our hearts. And the bottom line of this entire conversation is just to share that there's opportunities for us in this world, and we want to be the change that we want to see in the world, and I'm gonna continue to say that. And this is one way for us to do it. So those are my final thoughts, and just thanks again, everybody, for taking the time and being part of this.